Diane, I'm listening to a podcast, Black Lodge Trivia Night. I've never heard so many game aspirations in my life.
All right, welcome back to Black Lodge Trivia Night. This is Art, and as you can see, once again, we are down a Matt and a Patrick. Almost had a Patrick. It's been a crazy summer, but it ended up all falling apart at the last minute. And the hostile solo RPG I've been setting up isn't quite ready. And so I sort of had to face a choice. Do we just not have a video go up this week? It's the 4th of July weekend at the time it's recording, 2025. So, it wouldn't be the biggest deal in the world. But I was like, but you know what? I don't like the idea of skipping a week. And I got inspired by a YouTube comment that was left on one of my Lord of the Rings online Let's Plays. And again, always appreciate the people that check this stuff out. Always appreciate the comments. And what the commenter said, it was on part 33 of my Lord of the Rings playthrough. What they said is, I think you are overthinking the sound issue. There's more to it, and it was in something specific, but I wanted to get into that. That sort of inspired me a little bit because the way I respond to that is in two parts. One, they are absolutely correct. And two, they probably have no idea. I am an overthinker by nature. I my head's always spinning on some level. And I combine that with, I'm sort of like my toughest critic. And I don't mean that in the stupid kind of way. But I do feel like I'm able to look at something I worked very hard on and I'm very proud of. And I can sit there and say, yeah, it's fine. And because I feel like I have, maybe it tips a little bit too over the edge, but a little bit of an objective, almost a little bit harsh to try and be safe kind of perspective on the things that I do. And so when I sit here listening to my voice, editing these Let's Plays and things like that, and editing the actual plays, which again, we're mostly an actual play podcast, I hear my voice a lot. And I'm very I'm like, wait, what did I just catch? What's that? What's this? So you combine the overthinking with trying to be my toughest critic. And it sort of led me to overthink, a lot of aspects of what we do here in Black Lodge. And part of the fun of this, as I've said multiple times, is I love the idea of trying to figure all this out. But I do have this compulsion to figure it out. It's like, oh, no, that's not quite right. Okay, what can I do? I can't dial. Okay, that's as good as it's going to get. Disappointment. So what I thought I would do is I would go through my audio gear walk of shame. Just to show, A, how much I overthink some of this stuff. And B, I started at zero. I have a bit of a background in this kind of area, but the audio side of it, I really didn't know anything about. The video side of it, the camera, the lenses, that part I was able to parse a lot easier. It made a lot more sense. It was, I was a little bit better at, dialing that in. The audio, I didn't know anything. And so maybe there's somebody out there that's looking to, start doing this kind of thing and they don't know where to begin. And maybe my walk of shame might help you to skip a few steps in your walk of shame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tier list the audio stuff I've used in my journey to get to where I am today. And it's going to be a little dumb. And then at the end, I'll sort of try and wrap up with some closing thoughts. And, we'll go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, you might be able to see right here. I don't know how this is going to look when I put it all together. I'm going to start with the mic I'm using right now, just because, if I'm using it right now, I must think something of it. And so we'll get sort of this spoiler out of the way. And the microphone I'm using right now is the SE Electronics SE8. It's a small diaphragm condenser microphone. And I am going to put that right here. We're going to start out with a banger, S tier. I should say I feel like I have something in my eye right here. The criteria I'm looking for, and I should have stated this before I put one out here, is I wanted it to be pretty natural sounding, have some detail without having to kill myself EQing, processing, vocal chaining, anything like that. So I'm just looking for pretty natural sound in a pretty straightforward way. And so that's the criteria. So having said that, the microphone I'm currently using right now is a SE Electronics SE8. You can see it's a little bit off to the side. It's about 6 inches away. I don't care if the mic's in frame, but what I do care about is being able to see everything in front of me. And I really like that this microphone gets out of the way. I feel like the sound approaches what I'm looking for. You just have to be careful of plosives. Pop, 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 pop. If you put this thing in front of you, like, some kind of like SE SM7B, it's going to sound like ass. It's going to be really bad. So really be careful of getting it out of the direct, even with like a windscreen or something. Really think about that. But otherwise, we'll start off with a big win, and that is the SE Electronics SE8. I'm going to put that in the S tier because it at the moment it does everything I want it to do. It captures the sound and it gets out of my way. The two things that I really want. So going back in time, this all started with me realizing I was going to be doing probably a lot more Discord calls for online RPG sessions, and that some of those calls might be recorded, and that I might need to do Zoom calls, stuff like that. So the very first thing I did is I ran out to Best Buy and just grabbed the thing off the shelf, because again, like I said, I started at zero. I didn't know anything. So I was like, oh, this thing looks pretty cool, and it's the Blue Snowball. Now I'm going to put the Blue Snowball down here for a couple of reasons. One, it's not that it sounded terrible, but in its package, it's functionally useless. You can see in the picture there, the stand it comes with, it puts it about like that far off the table. So like you're either leaning in or it's about 6 feet away from you. It picks up every single bang on the table. And it's just not worth spending the money on, and then also spending the money on a boom, some kind of shock mount, some kind of pop filter. It's not worth it for what you're going to get out of it. In order to make it functional, you have to spend more money. And if you put all that money together, I don't know what the costs are of these. You probably do better. So I didn't really love that microphone. So then I'll try and do this as much in chronological order as I can remember, but my memory's pretty fuzzy, so who knows where it'll end up. But after I messed around with that, I know that the next thing I tried was a Rode NT USB Mini. Now, as far as USB microphones go, I genuinely really like this microphone. It comes with some like Rode Unity software that might help you do some things, might help you manage multiple mics coming at the same time if you were trying to record a podcast with like 2 or 3 people. These mics in particular, maybe 1 or 2 others from Rode, work with their software to let you manage the inputs. I thought it sounded really great. It's really small. It comes on, as you can see, that sort of pivoting yoke, or whatever you want to call it, to make it a little more flexible in how you position it. 2 things. I found it to be really sensitive. Like it was picking up a lot in the room that I didn't necessarily want it to pick up. And of course, it's really sensitive to plosives, so you just have to have some mic technique, get it out of the way. And just be aware that it's probably going to pick up a little. I found it picked up a little bit more of my surroundings than some of the other options. But otherwise, I thought, I think it's like $100. That, if I were looking for like a cheap USB microphone, I think like the Blue Yeti is going to be the $100-ish kind of range. I'd pick this over the Blue Yeti any day of the week. The Yeti has polar patterns you don't need. This sounds better and it's smaller, so I find it easier to work with. So after that, it gets a little fuzzy. I was probably still sticking with. No, that's not true. I think the next microphone I went for, I was like, you know what? I'm going to finally graduate to an XLR setup. And so the first XLR mic I tried was the Rode Pod Mic. Now, the Rode Pod Mic, again, I really like the design. I'm going to put it down here and see. I like that yoke. It makes it very easy to use. The thing weighs a ton for its size, so just be aware of that when you're getting a mic arm. It might need a little more resistance than you realize going into it. I just didn't like the sound. I don't know if, again, and the sound is all subjective. It's all my voice. It's all, it's going to be different for everybody. And that's why, I'm not sure how useful these things can be, but again, if it helps you sort of skip a few steps or think about things to somebody just jumping into the game, again, I'm coming at it with a perspective like I didn't know anything. And so maybe this helps. It was just too tinny. I don't know what the word is. It's like if you listen to experts like the Podcastage or, Time Preservation Society, all these, I'll put some links to like real audio guys who can provide reviews that help you hopefully narrow down what you're looking for. It's too much top end. It was too thin. It just didn't sound right. But it's $100. So, that's the good thing. They released an update to this model, the PodMic USB, and I've actually used that as well. And I would actually put that maybe I might put that in A tier. Now you're going to say, but it's like the sound is different, first of all. Second of all, while the PodMic was pretty plosive sensitive, this comes with a pretty good pop filter windscreen that I thought did a great job. The nice thing about the PodMic USB is partly in the name. It's both a USB and an XLR mic, so it can do both. If you use it in USB mode, you get access to basically a suite of software that's equivalent to Rode's very fancy audio interface, the Percolator. You sort of get the software for it. It saves the settings on the mic, so you can take the mic elsewhere and you've got your settings dialed in. And so if I were looking at a USB microphone, if that's what I was really in the market for, I think I'd probably go with the PodMic USB, even over the NT Mini, just for that added flexibility of the software if you wanted it. And it really does sound different in my mind, to my ears, than the original PodMic in good ways. It's a little darker. It's a little more low-endy in a way that I felt sounded a little more natural. And if you are interested in getting into the software that comes with it, that could be like a stepping stone to learning, the next tier of audio techniques like EQ, noise gates, stuff like that. But I'm also going to talk about some interfaces at some point, but I'll get into that more later. So I'll put this isn't in chronological order, but I figured I'd put those two together because they're kind of sort of the same thing, but I found working with the USB PodMic way better than the original PodMic. But going back in time, around this time I started to realize, like, I've got a PlayStation, I've got a console that I'd really like to be able to use my microphone for when I'm doing voice chat. I don't want to have to like bust out a headset with a microphone arm that sounds like crap. I don't want to do any of that. So it's like, what can I do to start integrating my entire setup into what I'm working with? I'll get into all of that in interfaces, what my actual setup is. But in this particular case, I was like, how can I get my microphone to work with both my computer for when I'm doing Discord calls or getting into the basics of starting to stream, and if I want to do a voice chat on like a PlayStation. At the time, it might have been PlayStation 4. Maybe it was a 5. I can't recall. And so the first thing I stumbled upon in that sort of dual purpose role was the MV7 from Shure. So I'm going to put the MV7 here. Maybe I can move it over a little bit. Oh, and because we're a tabletop actual play podcast live stream kind of thing, I'm using Foundry VTT, our role-playing software, to do this tier list. So that's why you're gonna see some weird artifacts like, why is this moving, 75.87 feet? It's because I'm using Foundry. And I can't say enough about Foundry. Foundry, how it works makes sense with how my brain works. And so when I need to like solve a problem, putting it into Foundry's terms has been pretty natural. Like, oh yeah, I can just do it this way and that way. The MV7 was great in that it was XLR and USB, much like the PodMic. Unlike the PodMic, I think you can have the USB and the XLR going out at the same time. I think the PodMic is if you plug the USB in, it overrides the XLR. The USB went to my PlayStation. The XLR went to my interface. It has some onboard controls on the mic. You can sort of see on the icon there's a little light, so I think you can adjust volumes. You might be able to mute. But this started my relationship with Shure microphones in that I didn't like how it sounded. Like, I tend not to like how Shure microphones sound with my voice. Even with putting work in to try and EQ it, like I said, I was starting from zero, and it escaped me. And so the MV7, so it was kind of interesting to be able to do those two things. I genuinely did not like the sound. So after that, what else? I don't know what else came in what order. But probably around this time, it was starting to get more serious. This is when I realized, I think I genuinely care about how my audio is going to sound. I'm going to be recording a lot more. And I want to get this to the next level. This is where the overthinking it meeting the criticism started to kick in. I was editing actual play RPG sessions. I was listening to my voice a lot, and I was starting to catch a lot of issues. So, at some point in this process, I decided, you know what? Let's start going all in and trying to figure this out. So you watch a lot of reviews, and the one that I came up with early on was the RE20. Now, the RE20, if you watch review, it's going to be just one of those classic broadcaster dynamic microphones. I thought it sounded decent, but it's expensive, and expensive plus sounded decent wasn't a great pairing for me. So it was definitely better sounding and easier to work with than my MV7. And I was like, yeah, okay. But again, you keep listening to it, and again, my overthinking it kicks in, and I'm like, yeah, nope. I think I can do better. And so at some point, I started to hear a lot of good things about Earthworks microphones. And the first one I gave a shot to was the Earthworks Icon Pro. Now, Earthworks microphones are interesting. There's two. The Earthworks Icon has a USB version, which is a very good USB microphone. It's expensive. It doesn't come with software, so I'd probably still go with the PodMic USB just for flexibility. And I genuinely, the sound is going to be really good either way. This is the XLR version that I used, and it was a really interesting microphone. It's supposed to be like a broadcast condenser, dynamic condenser. Condensers are sort of active in their voice pickup, so it's a little more detailed, it's a little more sensitive. Dynamics, it's more of a physical. As the waves hit the capsule, it physically, creates the signal. Things like, there's better explanations out there, but just know that in theory, condensers are going to be a little more detailed. Dynamics might be a little more focused on just your voice, but they're going to lose some detail. Honestly, there are people out there I've seen videos. It's but dynamics pick up less room noise, and then some people disprove that. Honestly, I wouldn't worry about anything like that. Just treat your room as best you can, and just pick the mic that sounds best. Dynamic, condenser, whatever. Dynamics need more juice from your interface, and that can make things sound like more. Condensers need less juice in a traditional sense. You basically have to flip a switch and it gets its juice differently. Anyway, but again, there's better people out there to explain the hardcore technical aspects of what happens. But I tried the Icon Pro. The Icon Pro sounded pretty good. I shouldn't say pretty. It sounded good. It did introduce me, if you can look in the to the picture here, to these Triad Orbit devices. Those things are a godsend. They're basically really good mounts that let you sort of adjust the position of something in almost any direction on a really good. Fit onto a typical mic arm, whatever. But yeah, so this sounded good. A little plosive, sensitive. Make sure it doesn't come with any kind of windscreen. But I thought it sounded good. But again, it was just maybe it's a little smudgy, muffled. I don't know. It just wasn't landing on what I thought my voice should sound like. Now, I'm going to sort of jump ahead a little bit because I've also messed with the Earthworks Ethos. And what's weird about the Earthworks Ethos and Earthworks Icon, when these two microphones were released, the Icon was about $400. I'm not sure what it is now. The Ethos was like $600 or $700. At some point, Earthworks really dropped the price of the Ethos, so now that the Ethos is cheaper than the Icon, and I think the Ethos sounds better. It's definitely, they call it again, a broadcast condenser, which means it's going to have a certain kind of boomier radio kind of sound to it, a little darker. I found that to be true. It comes with a windscreen that helped. It comes with the Triad Orbit mount. That thing's great. And so I had a lot of... I enjoyed using this microphone, but I never felt like I could EQ it quite right. It didn't check that box of getting that natural sound without having to beat it into shape in my head with EQ. People who know what they're doing could probably say, you don't need to beat it into shape. What are you doing? Just do this one simple trick the internet doesn't want you to know about. And, you're not adjusting the right frequencies. You're not doing this or that. But that was the Ethos. But it did sound really good. It had a great, mount. And the XLR condenser, so it's easier to power with an interface. You won't get like crazy from boosting the volume up. But so I'll put those two there. I should also say, like, this is going to be a very weird list because I'm not like an audio person. I might put microphones in places that most people wouldn't. So anyway, and around this time, like, I was getting like that kind of muffly, kind of lower end heavy sound, and I started hearing about a microphone called started hearing about microphones from a company called Lewitt. And Lewitt, I think, is like an Austrian or a German company, and their microphones are known for kind of two things: one, incredibly low self noise, and two, being a little heavier on the higher end. So I went out and I got a Lewitt LCT 440, and I really liked it. At the end of the day, it had... the end of the day, I think... You know what? I'm going to put it here. I feel like this should be down here too, because it was a step up from this. This isn't as bad as a C, but I don't know if it's such a step up that it crosses into A, because I still had some issues like trying to beat it into submission with. Let's do that. The LCT 440 comes with a really nice magnetic pop filter. It comes in a microphone stand that's got like, shock mounting. So it's a really nice overall package. It sounds really good. It sounds very detailed. It is too high on the high end, but overall it is a great choice. But again, I was like, my voice isn't sounding like I feel like my voice should be sounding like. You know what? No, that's not fair. The Ethos was good. Let's put that back there. Again, overthinking it. You're watching it in real time. As a response to that, couldn't clean up the muffle bottom, maybe too high on the top. I was trying to still find something, I don't know, more like a happy medium. And I think at this point, I started hearing about Austrian Audio's OC18. These microphones are great. Austrian Audio microphones are genuinely great. They're a little, I don't know if they're considered like broadcast condensers. I don't know if they get that same reputation that the Earthworks mics go for. But they're very smooth. I found them pretty easy to work with. Pretty easy-ish to EQ. Again, it always eluded me a little bit, but really great. And honestly, but the problem is they're expensive. And so they actually have like a sort of little brother kind of version of it called the OC16. Now, the OC16 is maybe half the price a little bit more than half the price. I don't recall the exact price, but it's a significant price difference. After listening to my voice for hours and hours and hours recording with both of them, I think I can hear a difference. I don't think that difference matters, and I doubt that difference will matter to anybody watching a YouTube video or listening to your podcast. So I don't know if I would invest for this kind of thing in the higher end model. It is a little better. It does come with a few extra accoutrements, but I don't know if it's worth it overall. So OC16, if I had to choose between the two, if I was going with an Austrian audio, OC16 is the one I would go with. A little bit of a easier price to swallow. This isn't going to be one of those lists like get your best mic for under $50. And there are some decent ones now getting pretty cheap from like Fafine or Mayano or something. I don't know the brand names, but so around this time I started to say, okay, what am I doing? Let me start, for some reason I'm not figuring out how to make this work. And so I started going down a little bit of a path, like a side path. And part of that path, I won't get into all of it now, but part of that path brought me to a Blue Sona. Now, Blue Sona is from Logitech. It's meant to be very SMB-like in its SMB7-like in its nature. The classic, the SMB7. SM7B, I'm sorry, I'm flipping that's why it sounded wrong. It's supposed to be SM7B-like in its nature. It does have like a built-in preamp, so it can give it that little extra juice, so you don't need to crank your volume up, so you get it's got a sound that can be pretty dark, like an SM7B, and it's got a yoke that's pretty easy to work with. You can see the shape there. It's actually easier than the SM7B in some ways. Overall, it was pretty nice to work with, but that darkness was something I could never quite figure out. And what I mean by that is to get it more towards the natural end of things. And you're probably noticing something wrong with my approach, in that I'm trying to make a microphone sound a certain way instead of understanding what the microphone is going to bring to the table and choosing it for that. Trying to, I want that darker sound, so you pick a darker mic, or I want more detailed top end. So you can see right away, I'm leaning into things probably in the opposite way that I should have. I'm trying to make the tool fit the job instead of picking the right tool for the job, if that makes sense. And that's been a big part of this learning process. So the Blue Sona, again, the sound was, dark in that SM7B. It lives up to that bit of advertising. That part is true. It just was not a good fit for what I was trying to do, and I would fight with it EQ wise, and there you go. So from there I started to realize, okay, maybe the answer is not in these darker microphones. Let me think about some other ones. And at some point I pulled out the SM57. Now, the SM57 is an is an all-time classic. It's a Shure microphone, and I've said I didn't know if I really liked Shure microphones. I did not like the M7V or the MV7. It's down here. The SM57 has a lot of things going for it. One, the form factor. It's nice and small, so it's easy to get out of the way, like this SE8 that I'm working with right now. Two, it's cheap. It's $100. And three, the sound is solid. And it's not quite as dark as maybe an SM7B. So I found it a little easier to work with. And the reality is that it sounded good. And it's a dynamic, so in theory, if some of the held beliefs are true, it might reject background noise a little bit. It is sensitive to plosives, so you either got to get it out of the way. They do sell accessories for it. Huge honking windscreens, smaller windscreens. It's famous for being the microphone that is often used to record the president when the president gives speeches, indoors or outdoors. It's a super durable mic. It's really cheap. And honestly, I found it much easier to work with sound-wise than things like the darker things like the Blue Sona, or the incredibly high-end like pod mic, So I really like this microphone, and I'll talk a little bit more at the end about that. Also around this time, I tried sort of a microphone from a slightly more like boutique company than like Shure, and that is the Lauten Audio LS208. This microphone sounded really good. It's a little more natural. It's a little without it. I think it might be also another like broadcaster condenser, but it's not dark like the SM7Bs. It's a little more in line with the RE20, but a little cleaner, maybe a little more. I don't know what exactly, because it is the RE20 is a dynamic, LS208 is a condenser, so it makes sense. You can get some pretty good like windscreens for it that really take care of plosives. Otherwise, it's going to be a little plosive sensitive. The problem with it is it's expensive. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock down that and that because of price. So the OC18 and the Lauten 208 are going to get knocked down to B tier because I think you don't need to spend that much money. I think the OC18, you might be better served with the 16, which is much cheaper. And the LS208, the RE20 is a lot cheaper than it. I might, I don't know. I'd probably pick the OC16 over the LS208 overall. Because again, the sound's not going to be, nobody's going to care. And the OC16 is way cheaper. So yeah, it's a really good sounding microphone. But I don't think it's worth spending the money. And so that was part of my realization. Like, it was easier to work with. It was easier to EQ. So I was happier with all that kind of stuff. But overall, though, I don't think for doing this kind of thing, I don't think it's worth it. I think if you're a broadcast professional or you have like a music studio, you might be looking at things differently. The cost versus return is a different equation. So I messed with that. And then what else did I mess with? Am I starting to get, let's see, 1, 5, 11, 15. So I'm starting to get toward the end of my walk of shame. And one of the microphones I landed on near the end was another SE Electronics microphone. This is the SE Electronics T1. I'm going to put that up here. I don't know what it is about SE Electronics microphones, but they have been basically at the end of the day exactly what I was looking for. I find them to sound very much like I feel like my voice should basically kind of sound. It's never going to be perfect. They're not that expensive, relatively speaking. The SE Electronics T1, or if you want the 4100, they're about $350. The SE8 is like $275. So you can see they're not like $8 million. These microphones are both cheaper than the Ethos, OC16, RE20, Icon, LS208, definitely OC18. So like you can see, like these microphones are not anywhere near the most expensive. That was a good lesson to learn, is that price does not equal quality. And it's a really easy large diaphragm condenser mic to work with. I was about to say, I used to have it right up there. It is sensitive to plosives. It does not come with any type of pop filter. I was able to get one sort of rigged together using a freely available file on the internet in a 3D printer. You could take a pop filter designed for another SC microphone, hook it into this little 3D printed clamp, and it worked great. It's comes with a nice shock mount, better than the LCT 440 shock mount in my experience. And then so it's really a toss-up. Why, these two microphones, the SE8, SE-T1. The T1 probably is a little more detailed because it's a bigger diameter. I don't know if I have this right though. But it is something that's like in your face. It does take up more space. And so if you're happy, if that kind of concern is really important to you, I feel like the SE8 is a really good sounding microphone for a really good price that can get out of the way as long as you're, a little more careful, get it to the side, things like that. The SE7 is another microphone similar to the SE8. SE8 obviously is the next generation. The SE7 is like $120. You could make the argument it might not sound that much worse or that different. Worse is the wrong word. So, again, if you're looking for something tiny, you're going to need a shock mount because it's going to register bangs and stuff. So you got to figure that out. But you can get those for like $30. It's not, it's not nothing, but it's not $1 million. And then, I don't know if the SE7 comes with a little windscreen like this does, but they're probably not that hard to get either. So again, I don't know. I might put an SE7 down on A, but I've never worked with it. But these two microphones ended up being the ones that I genuinely was like, yes, this is easy. I consistently don't mind the sound. Like I said, I overthink things and I'm a tough critic. So most of the time I'm like, yeah, that's good enough. Like I can, I'm not constantly noticing the flaws. And now you might be saying to yourself, well, Art, everybody knows the SM7B is the classic podcast online Joe Rogan microphone, and I don't see it on your list. Let's save that one here for last. And let's tier rank it. And I'm going to tier rank it. Gabam! How's that for clickbait? Now you're going to say okay, get the F out of here. You're out of your mind. How in the world can you make this microphone that's so loved and so ubiquitous so far down the chart? And let me tell you why. It's $400 and I can't get it to sound good. This is entirely potentially my failure. I listen to podcasters, say hey, now here's a recording of an SM7B with no EQ, and I'm just sitting going mine doesn't sound like that at all.
Mine sounds like this, and it sounds like it's going through a pile of shit.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it's my voice paired with this microphone, if it just brings out all the worst frequencies of my terrible nasally sound. I don't know what it is, but I have to just fight with it and fight with it and fight with it to get it to sound anywhere near. Yeah. And again, that's probably going to be something that's just on my voice. It's why the Blue Sona is down here, because they're very similar. Blue Sona I found a little bit easier. I appreciated the little boost that it had, requiring phantom power to help get your audio levels up. But the other reason why I'm putting the SM7B down here is because it's the one I've spent the most time with. I have tried so hard with my limited understanding and my limited knowledge to get it to sound the way I want it to sound. And I can't do it. I don't know what I'm missing, but I just can't do it. If you go to a YouTuber channel, Potato Jet, I feel like I should be writing down. Potato Jet does camera reviews and stuff like that. And he often uses an SM7B for his stuff. Just write down Potato Jet. And it sounds incredibly natural, just like he's talking into any other mic. And I'm like, how does he do it? And that's part of why I'm like, well, if he figured it out, why can't I figure it out? Now, some of his episodes, feature a friend of his that is a Hollywood audio engineer. Maybe he helped him set up a profile. I don't know. I feel like if you really know what you're doing, you're going to get the SM7B under control. But as somebody who is starting from zero, I can tell you I desperately struggled with it. And I feel like I will watch a lot of people on YouTube pull out SM7Bs, and they're probably in similar positions to me where like they didn't really know what they're doing, but they've sort of figured some things out. And I often think it sounds bad. Like I feel like you can get a better sound, but you feel beholden to use an SM7B because it's so ubiquitous. And I don't know if it's worth the time, the effort, or the price. If you're looking for like, I want to get up and running, I want it to sound good, and I shouldn't have to spend hours trying to dial it in. I don't feel like it's worth it. I feel like it's sort of like a trap. You know, it's a bit of a honey trap. And especially when you can get both of these S-tier microphones cheaper, they're easier to drive with a lot of interfaces because they don't require as much gain the way the SM7B does, even though most interfaces these days are going to be able to handle it. But, you know, but you're still going to have to be like cranking it way up. So, I don't know. So that is the microphone walk of shame that I've been on. And I've tried a lot of these out, some very quickly, some for a little bit longer, traded some, sold some off, you know. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you right now the microphones that I have kept. I didn't trade for other microphones. I didn't sell. I didn't anything. The microphones I have kept and will keep are the SE8. Obviously, I'm using one right here. I've got one downstairs on my sort of, if you've watched the channel at all, sometimes I've done book reviews where you have a top-down camera. The SE8 is the microphone that I've landed on for that setup as well. I'm keeping the SE-T1 just because I like the idea of having like a larger diaphragm microphone, but it is a little big and a little more view obstructing. And the SM57. If I want that sure, that dynamic, maybe a little darker kind of vibe, I'm going with the SM57. It's 25% of the price as the SM7B for this kind of stuff, and probably 99% of use cases for a person like us. It's going to be just as good as the SM7B. And I just don't get the SM7B, but I only arrived at that after fighting with it for so long and being like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. So those are the microphones that I've kept. I probably have my NT Mini like shoved in a bin somewhere because I was, packing stuff up and it's just so tiny. I probably just threw it in there. You see, it comes with this stand. This stand is useless. It's even shorter than the Snowball stand by some bit. But I do feel like the NT Mini is worth getting like a cheap arm to get it up a little bit and put it off to the side. It's a great $100 mic, if that's what you're looking for. Pod mic might be like $200, even though that would be, if I was choosing a USB microphone, I would go with the Pod mic USB. It is more expensive, but it does have better software options, more robust software options, and it does offer XLR and USB. It's a dynamic, so it's going to be a little bit less sensitive. I found the USB Mini really sensitive, so that is the microphone walk of shame, but I'm not quite done yet because there's two parts to audio. There's the microphone and then there's the interface. Now, the interface journey, the walk of shame, is a little more focused, but it does still exist. And so let me at this point explain what was the setup I was looking for. Initially, the setup was I needed, obviously, to do Discord calls. I was going to start playing RPGs online. They were going to start getting recorded. I wanted to be able to send the microphone output to a console if possible. And then I wanted the audio interface to bring in a console and potentially a computer. My current setup is this. I've got my main computer, my main PC. I've got a work computer that's provided to me by my job. I do all my work on it. 2 computers. I run my Foundry server on its own machine. 3 computers. Sometimes I need to use it, though, as a real computer. The work computer is a MacBook Pro. The Foundry server is a Mac Mini M2, I think. I've got a console. So, PlayStation 5. I used to have a Switch. So at some point I had 2 consoles. I got rid of the Switches in the living room. So I've got a console and 3 computers. So it's 4 devices that I need my audio interface to somehow manage to a degree so it all goes into unified headphone output. And also external speakers. So it's a complicated bit of set. You know what? I don't think, it's more complicated. People out there will have maybe like 2 PC streaming setups, so there are complicated setups out there. Mine is complicated in its own way, so I had pretty strict demands. And the device doesn't end up doing all of it. It ends up like running things through the monitor and having the monitor's output cover different things. There's a whole bunch of little tricks. But the main thing was being able to handle all my devices to my headphones, and in a perfect world, send my mic both to my computer and to a console. That last bit is a bit of a unicorn. So the very first one I gave a try was the classic, the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. The Focusrite Scarlett Solo I'm going to put down here. It gets the job done. I didn't care for it. It basically had no functionalities. I started to realize what I wanted it to actually do. It's just too limited. It's a way to get your microphone into your device. And this is the older revisions, so it was even a little too quiet for some of the microphones. So it wasn't great. The newer ones, I think, solve that too quiet issue. So maybe it's relatively inexpensive. So, if you just want to get a microphone into your computer and that's all you care about, it's fine. After I messed with that a little bit, another one I messed with, this isn't going to be in chronological order. Another one I messed with is the Lewitt Connect 6. I mentioned the Lewitt microphones. Around that time, I started to figure out the Lewitt Connect 6. I'm going to put the Lewitt Connect 6 here for its main drawback. Oh, and part of the thing I wanted is, I said, I need a physical mute button. I don't need a physical mute button. I really want some kind of physical mute button, whether it's on the device, whether I somehow figure it out with a Stream Deck, whatever it is. Doing it in software while I'm trying to record or stream is not viable. I've even recorded a couple times here when I got a cough, so. The Lewitt Connect 6 has no mute button, and that is a big drawback. But it is such a Swiss Army knife of interfaces that I'm able to forgive a lot. It's one of the few devices that would let me use my microphone with a PlayStation because it has a USB-C plug specifically meant to record from phones, but it sort of boils things down enough so that it also works with a PlayStation 5. That was great. And it's just got so many I/O ports that all those devices I was talking about earlier, it was really easy to get it all wired in and get it up and running. Lack of physical mute button is a pretty big deal. But man, the options of what that thing can plug into and send out is, there's not too many devices that are on its same level. What else? The physical mute button got me into thinking about the Wave XLR from Elgato. Now, the Wave XLR from Elgato, I'm going to put here. It's, for what it is, it does it really well. It doesn't have onboard DSP, if that matters. Your computer's going to be doing the audio processing, but it does have a nice bit of options for those software plugins. It has a really good capacitive mute button on the back. It's really straightforward. It's pretty clean gain. It has enough to drive an SM7B, blah, 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 but it's very limited. And so I think the actual right answer, if you really want to get into Elgato's software ecosystem, and their Wavelength software allows you to create virtual channels and route things, and it's really good, but it does require certain devices. There are, I think, alternatives like from SteelSeries that doesn't require anything. Maybe Logitech has something else as well if you're looking to create virtual channels. I think SteelSeries has software that'll set that up and no strings attached. Elgato's, you need to have certain devices. The Wave XLR is not something I would buy now, but Elgato has created a Wave XLR sort of expansion for their Stream Deck Plus. bumps the price up of the Stream Deck Plus, but the Stream Deck Plus is such a useful device to begin with. Turning it into a Wave XLR, if that's the route you want to go, is a great option. I think it's too bad that's not how it came out at first, but yeah, Wave XLR expansion to the Stream Deck Plus dock is a great thing. If you don't mind audio, if you don't mind your computer handling any audio effects, and I always struggled a little bit with its EQ and stuff like that, but it's pretty robust, and it does basically everything like a Rodecaster Pro 2 sort of can do, like noise gates, EQ, dropping all these plugins, as long as you don't mind your computer running them while you're trying to run games. So yeah, the Wave XLR expansion to the Stream Deck Plus is the route I would go for these things. So after I did that, what else did I mess with? Then I started to get into, and this is going to be another controversial. I went like, okay, everybody, okay, the de facto standard bar is set by the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the Duo. Here we go. Between the two, I've messed with both. Between the two, the Duo, I think, is the right one. For a normal person, you're never going to need all of the everything that the Pro 2 can do. It's a lot of inputs. It's a lot of, it's a lot of stuff that you are almost never going to use. If you think you might need 4 XLR inputs, then, go for it. But the Duo also as a physical device is exactly what I was looking for. The faders, the physical mute button, it's a really nicely laid out device, and I definitely prefer faders to like knobs like you see on the Lewitt or the Wave XLR. It's a good size for your desk. The Procaster 2 is just almost comically big. The Mackie DLZ creators are even more comically big. Anyway, I haven't messed with those though. But here's the problem. Much like the SM7B, they're expensive, and I feel like I'm fighting with them. And the part I'm fighting with is the software DSP, the digital signal processing. The EQ, the Aphex big bottom and aural exciter, like all these things that, I feel like it's too smudged over. It's not precise enough. I don't know exactly what it is, but even like a microphone that I try on what I'm currently working with, I'll get to in a minute, like the SE8 sounded much better on the device. I was able to tune it without going nuts much more easily on the device I'm using currently, which I'll get to in a minute, than I ever was on the Rodecaster Duo, or the Rodecaster Pro 2. I don't know what it is. Again, it's me, and it's a disconnect. People take the SM7B, they flip on the Rodecaster Pro Duo's like SMB presets, talk into it, sounds amazing, like Tom Buck. Let me write that down. He's another good guy for reviews from a more layman standpoint. I did it, and I honestly, I thought like something was broken. It sounded so, and it just sounded so bad, to the point where I was like, is my device broken? But I had similar experiences. Both I returned one of them. I returned the Duo because I was like, this must be broken. And the Procaster 2, I was like, no, it's not broken. It's just for some reason on my voice with this microphone. And it was the setup, the combination that I fought with the most, and it's just not worth it. You can get cheaper options, especially for like a solo kind of creator, that I think are going to be way easier to work with, that are going to get the job done. Not quite there yet. Another one I messed with was the SSL12. Now the SSL12 is strictly like the Focusrite, an audio interface. It doesn't do processing, it doesn't help you EQ, it doesn't do anything. It's just a way to get your microphone signal into the computer. And what I wanted in this case is I wanted something that could record 4 channels. There may be a use case at some point where I need that. sort of thinking ahead and overthinking ahead maybe. And I wanted to make sure that was covered. So what I liked about it is it was, again, sounds good, unprocessed. It sounds good. It was actually surprising. I was just like, let me see if I can set it up with my requirements and just see what I can get it to do. I was shocked that I was able to get basically all my devices in, using the cheats and the workarounds that I do. I was able to sort of fake a physical mute button because the SSL12 lets you choose at least on XLR input 1, there's a line button, and it lets you choose, do you want it to be the XLR input or do you want it to be the instrument input in the front? So if you have the XLR but nothing in the front, you just hit line and it cuts off the XLR. It's because it's going to the other plug that's got nothing in it. Like it actually, so if you don't need like a like 4 XLR inputs, there's like SSL versions that only have like 2 inputs that could be cheaper. They're not that expensive, relatively speaking. They're not like, $10, not cheap like the Focusrites, but I think they can do more than the Focusrites. I think they sound better in my limited experience than my experience with the Focusrite. And I was able to get it to do everything. Like as soon as I figured out like I can make this physically mute, that was one of the deal breakers on the Focusrite. And the Lewitt, and I got it to work on the SSL devices. So yeah, I genuinely, and that is one of the devices I've kept. So now to get to where I eventually landed. For my downstairs recording, where it's like the overhead camera, it's not as complicated as what I'm working with now. I have a Roland Bridgecast 1. It provides me basically a manual mute button. It gives me access to Roland's EQ and processing software. Then that stores that as onboard DSP. It's small because I have I'm trying to do something else. I need the table space for other things downstairs. It's not that much bigger than the Wave XLR, but it does way more. And for what it is, it's just exactly what I need to be now. And to give myself a little bit of a break, this device did not exist when I started, right? This device is only a couple years old or whatever. So I had to go through a lot of learning, and then somebody came out with a thing like, oh, that's what I was looking for. And now for what I'm using here on my desk, after this is going to bring our walk of shame to a close, I'm using the Roland Bridgecast X. The Roland Bridgecast X, the one downside, at least on my personal setup that I've encountered, is that it doesn't play well with Riverside.fm. I was having tons of technical issues getting stuff to maintain like decent quality on Riverside FM. And I think part of it was using the HDMI inputs on the back of the Roland Bridgecast. The Bridgecast X is meant to be like a all-in-one device. It allows you to do pass-through with HDMI so that if you wanted to stream and stuff like that. I have better streaming cards in my computer, so that might have been part of the conflicts, is that I have AverMedia capture cards, and then this was getting introduced for my camera, and I was just like, it might have just been causing conflicts or something. The Roland Bridgecast X is one of the few devices like the Lewitt Connect 6 that if I wanted to, I could connect my PlayStation and use my microphone with my PlayStation 5. That actually is no longer really a big thing anymore. My console gaming has really plummeted. I'm almost strictly a PC gamer now. When I do, and now that like Discord, all these things are available, it's really easy to get a call going on Discord without having to use the on-system chat of like a PlayStation. So if I were looking at this now, I might not go for the Bridgecast X. I might go for the pure audio device, which is the Roland, might just be called the Roland Bridgecast. Let me just double check that. The Roland Bridgecast is basically, the Roland Bridgecast dual bus gaming. The Roland Bridgecast is $329. The X is about $5. So you're spending like an extra $160 to get that HDMI pass through. But it does have an extra USB-C that allows the microphone to go to the PlayStation. If I ever want to do it again, I can. The base Roland Bridgecast does not. The Roland Bridgecast, you can see, has dials instead of sliders, instead of faders like the Duo. But I got used to that. And honestly, it's mostly fine. It's not the end of the world either way. But the Roland Bridgecast X, in my mind, does everything that the Pro and the Duo do for the same price as the Duo. But I find the software to control the DSP more nuanced, much easier to work with, much easier to dial in. And overall, like, I've just, again, like, I didn't have to fight it. I didn't have to fight to accomplish what I was trying to accomplish. So I wish the Duo had the Roland software. That doesn't exist. It's not. Maybe you could argue that the Mackie line is a little bit closer to that, but there's other things about the Mackie. Like, the Mackie doesn't do virtual channels, so I'd be trying to fight with it in that regard. And I can get around it again with Elgato Wavelength software or whatever. But the Bridgecast does do virtual channels. The Bridgecast lets me connect my microphone to a console. The Bridgecast has software that gives you more control and is less fuzzy, the way like the Aural Exciter and the Big Bottom processing on the Duo is, in my mind. I just, it's just a layer of obscurity that gets in my way. Like, I don't know what it's doing. Like, I want the sound to do this, and like, I don't know how to do it. It's just overall, like, especially like the Roland Bridgecast, the baseline, that's $320. That's $180 cheaper than the Duo, and it does everything basically the Duo can. And in my mind, it does it better. You're just giving up faders, or the idea in your head, which is something I'm susceptible to, that this is how I need it to be. It's supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to be using this. This is what everybody's telling me. This is what I'm seeing all the time. So at the end of the day, and I will say, like, I do this with Matt and Patrick. We don't, Matt, they don't overthink and they don't worry about this stuff. And obviously, I'm borderline obsessive on some level, but I do feel like I am at a place where I have the equipment I want. I'll always keep an eye out on audio interfaces, but I've sort of realized the kind of microphones that I like, and I have them. And it's not something I ever could have just jumped to. Like, you can't jump to the ending, right? This is how I learned what I know. And I like having arrived here because I don't think about it as much as I used to. Like, I still probably talk about it on streams, like, the original comment mentioned at the beginning of this that I mentioned, because I find it interesting, but I don't sit there going like, damn it, like, that could have been better, or why am I dealing with this, or why is this still happening, or how come I can't get rid of that, or, it's not like nagging my brain like, this is a problem that you need to fix, this is a problem. Like, I'm not getting that as I listen to my voice over and over and over, putting things together, editing, And so at the end of the day, like, this is what it took for me to do it. Like, it was a dumb process. It's a walk of shame that was probably harder than it needed to be. But I will say I found the process interesting. Like I said, I wanted to learn things, and I feel like I really have learned. But I don't feel like everybody has that desire, nor should everybody have to bust their ass to learn. Like, it shouldn't be this hard for me to learn. It was. You got Matt and Patrick. Matt, I think, had some technical issues with his first mic. Like, not like, oh, I don't like the sound of this. Like, there was something he couldn't figure out, so he dumped it, and then he just got a Rode NT1. The Rode NT1 is like, boom, just go for it. Like, it's just an easy, great choice. Don't think about it. I haven't used it for a couple of reasons. One is it's too big, because it really needs its shock mount. It really needs a pop filter, and it's just too big. Matt, if you watch some of our videos, he's able to put it vertical. I can't do vertical, which is some of the issue I had with the LC T440, the OC, all of these kind of like mics, like the LCT, OC 1816s, T1. I can't do vertical, which would be easiest because it blocks too much of what I'm trying to look at. putting them on their side is okay, but then the NT1 is really long. It's a pretty physically big microphone. I was like, so I've never really touched it for that. It's also pretty sensitive. But it's got incredible low self noise. It's like super quiet. It sounds super good. It's really cheap. I take that back. Like, really cheap is relative, right? But it's like, I don't know, is it $200? It's something like that. It's cheaper than the mics I picked. And, Matt bought that. He locked it in with his audio interface, and he was off to the races. Doesn't think about it, as far as I know. And it's been great. He's been podcasting for a while. He's always sounded great. He fired and forgot it, and it's been a great setup ever since. Patrick, I think, jumped on a Blue Yeti. Works great for him. That's the thing. Like you don't, and that was actually the real lesson I've learned through all this. Audio is more important than video. When you're doing this kind of stuff, you have to understand that your audio is more important than your video. Having said that, the bar you have to get over for your audio is much lower than you realize for this. All right. It's much lower than I realized. It's not as hard as you think it might have to be. You don't have to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because it will not matter. And that's really the lesson to take from this. And that's why if it's just like, we're like, hey, Art, you seem like you're crazy and you've thought a lot about this. What would you buy? For a normal person, I would get the Roland Bridgecast, and I would get an SE Electronics T1 or an SE8 or an SM57. That's what I would do. The reason why I would get this over the Bridgecast 1 is just having more physical dials. But if you feel like you're not even going to have to balance in-game audio or anything like that, if you just don't care, or you're okay like switching between buttons and keeping track of it, Bridgecast 1. It's $180. You choose which one you want to change the audio on by pressing these buttons. It's got a physical mute button for your mic, and it's a little bit more steps to do each thing, where this is more all in front of you at once. But that's what I would do. But that's really the main thing, is like the difference between, well, one, there's no such thing as perfect audio. Get that out of your head. Even listening to like podcasts and stuff like that, sometimes I'm like, I don't listen to the Joe Rogan podcast as a listener, but I've heard clips and I'm like, yeah, it sounds like an SM7B. It sounds like a sound I don't necessarily love, but they're everywhere. When I see Potato Jet use an SM7B, I'm like, that sounds amazing. And if I could get it to sound like that, I would have used it, but I couldn't. There is no such thing as perfect audio, but good audio is not that hard to achieve. And it just takes a few steps. If you don't want to get a device with onboard processing, learn it in OBS. You can drop a filter. You don't even need it probably most of the time. Like I said, my understanding is Matt's got his NT1 audio device, no processing, sounds great. You just have to find the right microphone for the job. And for too long, I was picking the wrong microphone and trying to shove it into the hole shape that my job was. It sounded dirtier than I intended. And I didn't need to. A lot of time and energy was spent trying to make this microphone work. When it struggled with one audio interface, I was like, oh, I guess the problem's the audio interface. Let me try. It wasn't the audio. It was me not understanding the microphone. It's like a more advanced user kind of microphone, and I just wasn't meant for me. So there you go. That is my walk of shame. Good audio is not that hard to accomplish, because good is good enough. It's not something worth chasing. I saw one YouTube guy who's like, and then for my Zoom calls, I wanted a Neumann U87. That's a $3,000 microphone. And I'm just sitting there going like, this is stupid. Even me, as crazy as I am, overthinking, harshest critic, whatever, even I was like, what are you doing, man? Like, is that just a flex? Is that just like an online influencer? This is what I have. I don't know. It does not matter. Good audio is not that hard, but it is very important. And I think it is worth spending a little bit of money on and a little bit of time learning how to tweak. But once you get those little tweaks in, even if you don't tweak it, just getting it to like a baseline good, that'll carry you for the rest of your life. Because especially now when a lot more people are doing a lot more recording, I think we're getting a lot more used to. Sorry, that's why it's good to have a mute button. We're getting a lot more used to non-professional audio that's good. And so I think we're like, yeah, that's all acceptable. That's fine. You know, and you have to clear that benchmark. But once you do, you don't have to clear it by a million miles. So anyway, hopefully this is somewhat useful to somebody. Again, it's mostly because I'm not quite ready for the Hostile solo RPG. I'm still doing some Foundry prep for that. And either hopefully next week we'll have everybody back on mics, but again, the summer is crazy, especially now it's around the 4th of July holiday. But I think at a minimum next time I should be able to have Hostile ready, so you won't ever have to deal with this ever again. But I thought it'd be fun, mix things up a little bit. Took me 15 minutes to set up. Foundry VTT. Anyway, so thanks again for watching this. This is absolutely not our normal stuff. We are not a technical channel. We are a RPG actual play podcast. You can see all the systems we played. If you prefer audio versions of the actual plays that we do, just search for Black Lodge Trivia Night wherever you get your podcasts, and we should show up. I do CRPG Let's Plays. We've got some Souls games right now. I'm currently working on, as I've mentioned, the Lord of the Rings online book quests Let's Play. And at the time of this recording, doing some Fall of Avalon Tainted Grail, having just wrapped up Fable, but the next couple of Fable sessions aren't out yet. So that'll eventually wrap up shortly after this is, soon after this is going to go up, and then we'll get into some Fall of Avalon. But otherwise, thanks again. Hopefully this was interesting. It was a fun exercise. It truly is a walk of shame though. So I'm not proud. Anyway, take care. Thanks again.